Does complementarianism lead to better marriages? Let's talk about it. Okay, within evangelicalism, there are basically two different ideas of how God wants us to do marriage: complementarianism and egalitarianism. Complementarianism is the belief that God ordained gender roles in marriage. So he ordained that men would be an authority over women and that men and women would live out these roles within the marriage. Egalitarianism, on the other hand, does not see marriage as being about roles, but instead believes that both husbands and wives should serve each other as you follow after God together. So there is no actual authority in marriage. Now, which one does better? Complementarians often claim that their way does best, and the research proves this. But you know what? It's not so clear at all. And in fact, research is more on the egalitarian side. Here's why. How do you measure the difference between complementarians and egalitarians? Complementarians would say, well, we just need to see what happens when husbands love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for it. But that's very hard to measure. But besides that, egalitarians also believe that husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church. Or complementarians might say, well, we believe that husbands should take responsibility for the family and make sure they're providing for the family. But egalitarians also believe that husbands should make sure that the family is provided for. They just simply believe the wife needs to do that too, and that between the husband and wife, they can figure out who does what in the marriage. So if you're going to actually measure whether complementarianism does better than egalitarianism, you need to measure what makes complementarianism different from egalitarianism. And there really is only one thing: whether or not the husband functions in authority over the wife. And one neat way to measure this is just simply to say, when you have a disagreement in marriage, how do you come to a decision? Does the husband make the final decision, or do you work at it some other way? And that's what we did in our studies. I'm Sheila Ray Gregoire, and we've been doing research at my ministry, Bare Marriage, for several years now. In fact, we've done the largest surveys and studies of evangelical marriage and sexual satisfaction that have been done to date. We've done 4 of them. Our first big one was of 20,000 women for our book, The Great Sex Rescue. And we looked specifically at what happens when husbands make the final decision. And guess what? It doesn't work out well. When husbands make the final decision, even if they ask their wife first and get her input, the divorce rate increases 7.4 times. That's huge, and we are not the only ones who found this. John Gottman, the world's premier marriage researcher, who is also widely quoted by Focus on the Family, Emerson Eggerichs, etc., found a divorce rate of 81% when husbands make that final decision and don't share power with their wives. Okay, so you may be thinking, all right, but I'm looking around my church and we're all complementarian and there is not a divorce rate of 81%. And you're right, there probably isn't, for one big reason. The vast majority of people who believe in complementarianism do not act it out. In fact, 78.9% of couples who call themselves evangelical make decisions together. They function as egalitarians. The husband does not make that final decision. And when they work that way, the marriage tends to do pretty well. So let's look at some of the other measures of whether or not a marriage is healthy. What about abuse? Well, there was a study in 2019 by the Institute for Family Studies, which is a conservative think tank. They studied 16,000 people from around the world. They divided couples into 6 groups based on how religious they were and also whether they were patriarchal or egalitarian. So did they believe in male authority or did they not? And what they found is that if you are highly religious, so in other words, like evangelicals, and you believe in male authority, your chance of being abusive is like the second worst. So the worst is to not be religious at all and believe in male authority, but the second worst is to be highly religious and believe in male authority. You know who had the lowest abuse rates? Those who were highly religious but believed in egalitarianism. So whether it's divorce or abuse, egalitarians do better. What about infidelity? Well, there's another cool study that they called the power to flirt, which was asking the question, how do power dynamics impact infidelity? And what they found is that in marriages where someone has power over the other, their chance of them cheating is much higher. In fact, cheating is not related to how often you have sex or what the sexual issues are in your marriage nearly as much as it is about the power dynamics within your marriage. So whether it's infidelity, abuse, or divorce rates, egalitarians do better than complementarians. So here's the thing. You may firmly believe that the Bible preaches complementarianism, but Jesus told us something in Matthew 7 that I think we need to take to heart. He said, when you're looking at two different doctrines, when you're trying to figure out who a false teacher is, you need to look at the fruit. Because a bad tree can't bear good fruit and a good tree can't bear bad fruit. So you're supposed to recognize them by their fruit. Well, the fruit of egalitarianism is good and the fruit of complementarianism isn't. If a doctrine only works if you don't practice it, that doctrine is not a good doctrine. And Jesus says we should pay attention to that. So I want to say something specifically to pastors and teachers right now. Chances are you practice as an egalitarian in your marriage. Most of us do. And if you've got a good marriage, that's probably how you're acting. But remember, if what you preach is complementarianism, more than 20% of the people who are listening to you are going to act it out to disastrous results. So will you please start preaching what you practice? Preach egalitarianism, because that's what actually works.